Heartbreak isn't, it's not just some emotional metaphor.
Right.
It's not just a sad country song playing in the background of a romantic comedy or something. It is a visceral, physiological event.
Yeah, a complete neurological withdrawal.
Exactly. And ultimately, it's this really profound psychological reconstructive process. So if you're listening to this and you have ever felt like your world was quite literally ending because a relationship did, you are not being dramatic.
No, not at all.
Your body and your brain were going into sheer, unadulterated survival mode.
And to really understand the anatomy of that heartbreak, we've pulled together an incredibly diverse stack of sources for you to explore today in this deep dive.
Yeah, we really run the gamut on this one.
We do. We're looking at clinical TED Talks by renowned psychologists like Guy Winch. We have peer-reviewed academic studies diving into post-traumatic growth, and then these really raw, kind of boots-on-the-ground survival guides.
From people who have actually been there.
Exactly. Individuals who have successfully navigated the absolute trenches of divorce and betrayal. Because the aim here is to bridge the gap between that cold clinical data and the intensely lived human experience.
Right. And the mission for this deep dive is to map out that exact anatomy for you. We are going to decode the sneaky tricks your own mind plays on you when you're in pain.
Oh, there are so many of them.
So many. And we'll provide a science-backed toolkit for everyday survival and show you exactly how to emerge from the wreckage smarter, stronger, and, genuinely happier. Because the sources are very clear on this. It is entirely possible to systematically dismantle the pain and rebuild.
But before anyone can really start that rebuilding process, we first have to look at the initial impact. We have to look at what is happening to your brain and your body the moment that heartbreak actually hits.
Yeah, and I was reading through the notes from one of our sources, John Griffin, and he uses this analogy that is it's so perfectly brutal for this initial impact.
The train analogy.
Yes, the train tracks. It says going through a divorce or a major heartbreak, it basically feels like standing paralyzed on a set of train tracks. Mm-hmm. You can see the train coming from a mile away. You feel the vibrations under your feet getting stronger and stronger. You can even smell the grease of the engine.
It's so visceral.
Right. And it seems like it should be so incredibly easy to just, take a single step to the left or right to get out of the way. But you can't.
You're just frozen.
You are entirely paralyzed just watching this inevitable, devastating collision happen. So what is actually going on inside us during that moment of paralysis?
Well, what's fascinating is that your body, it actually is not distinguishing between emotional pain and physical danger.
Really?
Yeah. A betrayal or a sudden abandonment, it triggers a literal fight or flight response. Mm-hmm. Your nervous system perceives a mortal threat. So to your brain, losing your partner is processed the exact same way as encountering a predator in the wild.
Wow. So it's life or death to your brain.
Literally. It floods your body with stress hormones, specifically cortisol and adrenaline.
Okay.
So the symptoms you experience...
Like the physical symptoms?
Yeah, those sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, the pacing anxiety, the literal physical chest pain, that deep, hollow sense of loss. That is a clinical trauma response.
It's not just sadness.
No, not at all. It is an overwhelming systemic shock to your entire nervous system.
I mean, I was absolutely floored by psychologist Guy Winch's TED Talk regarding this systemic shock.
Oh, his research is incredible.
It really is. He presented research showing that romantic withdrawal, it activates the exact same mechanisms in our brain that get activated when addicts are withdrawing from hard substances.
Like cocaine or opioids.
Exactly. Let that sink in for a second for anyone listening. Heartbreak is quite literally an addiction withdrawal. You are in detox.
In that reframing, it's just so crucial for giving yourself some grace. Because you cannot have the quote-unquote heroine of actually being with that person anymore. Your unconscious mind scrambles for a substitute.
It needs a fix.
Right. It settles for what Winch calls the methadone of memories.
The methadone of memories. That is such a vivid way to put it.
You start craving anything that gives you a hit of connection to them, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's looking at old photos or obsessively checking their social media.
Yeah, we've all been there.
And while you are in the throes of this withdrawal, something really wild happens. This emotional pain temporarily lowers your IQ.
Wait, it actually lowers your IQ.
Genuinely impairs your intellectual functioning. When you're trying to perform complex tasks involving logic and reasoning, your brain is just too starved for its dopamine fix to operate at full capacity.
Well, that definitely explains why we make such objectively terrible decisions post-breakup.
Right.
Our own minds are actively tricking us while our IQ is compromised. Winch describes this tendency to completely idealize the person who broke our heart.
Oh, the idealization phase is so dangerous.
It's so intense. We will sit there for hours remembering their smile or, that one perfect vacation to the mountains. And we were completely ignoring the fact that they never did the dishes, or they chewed with their mouth open, or they were emotionally unavailable.
We just block it all out.
Yeah. He says, it's like being held hostage by a passive-aggressive Spotify playlist of the relationship's greatest hits.
That's a great analogy. And zooming out for a second, this idealization is just one of several toxic narratives we construct when we're vulnerable like this.
What are the other ones?
Dr. Micah Steinborn, she's a psychologist who focuses on self-esteem post-breakup, and she breaks down these mind traps beautifully. When we put the ex on a superhero pedestal, remembering only their best qualities, we automatically place ourselves in an inferior position.
Right, because if they are perfect, we must be flawed.
Exactly. But she identifies another trap that is arguably much worse, and that's the I ruined everything rumination loop.
Oh man, the midnight rumination loop.
You know the one?
Yeah, you lie awake thinking, if only I had said this differently on Tuesday, or if only I hadn't pushed them on that one specific issue, we'd still be together.
Right.
Why do we torture ourselves by taking all the blame?
Dr. Steinborn points out something really profound about why our brains prefer that torture. We do it because it gives us a false sense of what she calls pseudo-control.
Pseudo-control.
Yeah. Think about it. If we convince ourselves that the breakup was entirely our fault, it secretly implies that we have the power to fix it.
Oh, wow.
Right. It provides a twisted, hidden kind of hope in an otherwise completely helpless situation.
Because the alternative is admitting we had no control.
Exactly. Admitting that we had no control and they just simply chose to leave, that is terrifying. But the cost of clinging to that pseudo-control is the absolute destruction of your self-worth. It just leaves you feeling inherently flawed and broken.
So to break out of those toxic loops, we have to face the reality of the pain instead of hiding behind these stories we tell ourselves.
We have to.
There is this incredible visual from David Kessler, the grief expert. This was shared in an interview with Matthew Hussey, actually.
I love this one.
Kessler points out that most human beings try to stay on the absolute edges of their grief. We keep the storm a few feet away from us at all times to avoid the sheer intensity of it.
We just dance around the perimeter.
Exactly. But out in the wild, when a massive storm is approaching, buffalo do the exact opposite.
They don't run.
They don't run away. They turn and they head straight into the approaching storm. And they do this because they instinctively know it is the fastest possible way to get right through to the other side.
Which really forces us to ask, why do humans run away from the storm?
Right.
Kessler suggests that we often use anger as our primary running shoe. He describes anger as a bodyguard for pain.
A bodyguard for pain.
Yeah. When we feel profoundly betrayed or rejected, the underlying sadness is a terrifying, bottomless pit. So we deploy anger to protect us.
Because it's easier.
It is much easier to be furious at an ex than to feel that vulnerable, deep sadness of losing them. So to truly heal and to be like the buffalo, you have to recognize the bodyguard for what it is.
You have to ask the anger to step aside.
You have to eventually thank the anger for protecting you, ask it to step aside, and just face the grief head on.
And facing it head on, that requires some immediate ground zero survival tactics.
Yeah.
The channel site 2Go uses this brilliant, simple analogy for this initial, highly painful phase.
The snake bite.
Yes, if a snake bites you in the woods, you do not chase the snake through the brush to ask it why it bit you.
You don't demand an apology from the snake.
No, you immediately sit down and you treat the venomous wound. You have to stop dwelling on the source of the pain and focus entirely on your own triage.
And John Griffin provides a very structured blueprint for how to perform that triage. He actually applies Maslow's hierarchy of needs to divorce recovery.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, when your entire life is shattered, you cannot start by worrying about high-level concepts like self-actualization or finding your life's purpose.
Right, you're just trying to survive the day.
You have to start at the very foundational bottom of the pyramid. You must secure your physiological and safety needs first.
Meaning what, exactly?
That means getting your physical living space sorted out, even if it's just renting a tiny, bare-bones apartment somewhere.
Sure.
And getting your basic finances stabilized so you can eat.
Just the absolute basics.
Yes. And once you have a safe base established, you have to find what Griffin calls your locus of control.
Okay, for someone listening who might not be familiar with that psychological term, what exactly constitutes a locus of control in this context?
A locus of control is essentially a specific area of your life where you firmly believe that your own actions dictate your outcomes. When going through a breakup, everything feels completely out of your hands.
Everything.
Griffin uses the gym as his personal locus of control. He explains that no matter how chaotic the divorce proceedings were that day, or what his ex-wife's lawyers said, he could go to the gym, push a heavy weight over his head, and know he had absolute 100% control over his physical body and his effort for that one specific hour.
It gives you a stabilizing anchor.
An anchor in a sea of chaos.
He also shares this wild anecdote about NFL quarterback Jayden Daniels to illustrate a broader mindset of control. Daniels is known for performing effortlessly under immense high-stakes pressure on the football field.
Right.
And Griffin attributes this to Daniels' deep faith in a larger plan. Because Daniels believes implicitly that things will ultimately work out the way they're supposed to, the immediate stress of a collapsing pocket or a bad play is neutralized.
He trusts his own resilience.
Exactly. He trusts his own resilience.
It is a phenomenal mindset to aim for. Cultivating a deep trust that a painful transition is simply part of a larger necessary trajectory that can strip away so much of the day-to-day panic.
It can, but, it's so easy to talk about having absolute control like a pro athlete on a football field. What happens when you're not in a stadium and you're just trying to survive a messy Tuesday afternoon?
That is the reality for most people.
Shawn Bradford gave a TEDx talk where she shared this deeply relatable story about that exact contrast. She was newly divorced, feeling like she had finally shed all the problems that came with her ex.
She thought she was in the clear.
Right. So one day, she has all 3 of her young kids completely asleep in the car, and she suddenly realizes she desperately needs a gallon of milk.
Oh no, a seemingly simple, mundane task that turns into a monumental hurdle.
A total nightmare scenario for a single parent. She has to wake the kids up, carry a heavy toddler, drag 2 groggy, crying girls into a brightly lit Circle K convenience store.
It's just sensory overload.
Exactly. It's loud, they're miserable, she's struggling to grab this heavy glass container of milk with one free hand while her kids are melting down.
Oh, that sounds so stressful.
They finally make it back to the car, and she just has an absolute full-body breakdown in the parking lot. She is bawling her eyes out over spilled milk, quite literally.
Literally crying over spilled milk.
But that Circle K breakdown, that was her massive aha moment. It was the moment she realized her problems hadn't magically disappeared just because her ex was gone.
Because that parking lot moment forced her to confront the one common denominator in all her problems, which was herself.
Yes. She realized that if she made a chart of all her relationships, friends, family, her ex, the column labeled relationship with self was completely empty.
Wow.
She had spent her entire life trying to fix other people to distract from her own deep flaws. She shared a story about how, right before her divorce, her sister called, saying she might break up with her boyfriend.
And what did Shawn do?
Shawn immediately drove over with empty boxes and frantically started packing up her sister's entire house.
Oh my goodness.
She was so desperate to fix someone else's crisis so she didn't have to look at the massive glaring crisis in her own marriage.
And that avoidance of the self is incredibly common. Shifting that focus inward brings us to the actual clinical science of recovery. How do we rebuild that empty relationship with self column?
Right.
A landmark study by David Sparra and his colleagues at the University of Arizona looked exactly at this mechanism.
This study is fascinating.
It really is. They designed a very specific methodology. They took 109 divorcing adults and had them sit in a room and record a 4-minute stream of consciousness audio diary about their separation.
Just 4 minutes of raw, unfiltered venting about their breakup. I mean, how do they measure anything from just 4 minutes?
They had a team of independent judges meticulously analyze these recordings. They were looking for specific psychological markers in the language the participants used, and what they found was staggering.
Oh, was it?
The participants who naturally displayed high levels of self-compassion in their 4-minute recordings, meaning they spoke kindly about their own struggles and acknowledged their shared humanity, they experienced significantly less emotional intrusion from the divorce up to 9 months later.
Wait. 9 whole months later, their emotional state was measurably better just based on how they spoke to themselves for 4 minutes.
Precisely. And what is most striking for anyone trying to heal is that self-compassion significantly outperformed both high self-esteem and general optimism as a predictor of long-term healing.
That is so counterintuitive.
You didn't need to confidently believe everything was going to be great, and you didn't need to think you were flawless. You just needed to be actively kind to yourself in the present moment.
So let's translate what that kindness actually looks like in practice. Self-compassion is not hubris. It is simply treating yourself the exact same way you would treat your own best friend if they called you at 2 a.m. going through this exact nightmare.
Right. You wouldn't tell your best friend they ruined everything.
You would extend grace. And the Psych2Go source actually recommends a highly practical tool for manufacturing this grace. It's the Hawaiian meditation practice of Ho'oponopono.
Oh, I've heard of this.
It sounds almost too simple, but the practice is placing your hands over your heart and repeating 4 specific phrases out loud. I'm sorry, please forgive me. Thank you, I love you.
Mm-hmm.
And while you can theoretically direct this toward the person who hurt you, it is infinitely more powerful when you direct it toward yourself to actively release the heavy emotional weight of perceived failure.
That's beautiful. And while self-compassion acts as the immediate soothing salve for the wound, self-esteem plays a critical role in the long-term architectural rebuild.
The rebuild phase.
Right. This dynamic is perfectly highlighted in a study out of Poland by researchers Kalita and Moroz. They examined post-traumatic growth, often referred to as PTG, in divorced men and women.
Okay.
In science speak, they found that post-traumatic growth is positively linked to subjective well-being. Now, subjective well-being is just the academic term for a person's self-reported happiness.
Sure.
But the crucial finding is that this link is mediated by the rebuilding of self-esteem.
Mediated by. So if we translate that, it acts kind of like a toll booth.
Exactly like a toll booth. You only get to that destination of true happiness if you pass through the toll booth of rebuilding your self-esteem first.
Makes sense.
As you process the trauma and learn to survive it daily, you prove to yourself that you are capable. That hard-earned competence rebuilds your self-esteem, which in turn allows you to actually feel happy again.
And there was a really surprising fact tucked into that Polish study regarding people who don't naturally have high self-esteem.
The spiritual growth aspect.
Yes. They found that spiritual growth, which is one of the dimensions of post-traumatic growth, specifically boosted happiness for individuals who had low to medium self-esteem.
It essentially acts as a crucial safety net for the people who need it the absolute most.
Right. If you don't naturally have high self-worth to fall back on, connecting to something larger than yourself becomes a vital bridge to get through that toll booth.
It all comes down to finding the specific tools that allow you to transition into what John Griffin calls Life 2.0.
Life 2.0.
And the statistics on what happens when you actually commit to this structured recovery are nothing short of staggering.
They really are. And I want to frame these stats carefully for you. If you are a guy listening to this and you feel entirely blindsided, which makes statistical sense, given Griffin points out data showing up to 90% of divorces are initiated by women,
Right.
you might feel like you are starting from absolute zero. But Griffin's research offers a massive light at the end of the tunnel.
A huge light.
Men who follow a structured recovery post-divorce end up earning 30% more money than they did before the split.
Wow.
Furthermore, 90% of them get into the absolute best physical shape of their lives. The data shows that the rebuild, while agonizing, can lead to a dramatically upgraded life.
Upgrading your life, however, absolutely requires clearing out the toxic residue of the past. You cannot build Life 2.0 on a foundation of bitterness.
No, you can't.
And that requires forgiveness. But we need to define the mechanics of forgiveness correctly because it is so often misunderstood.
How so?
Forgiveness is not about condoning the betrayal. It is absolutely not an invitation to let a toxic person back into your life. The sources consistently echo a powerful analogy. Holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and hoping it hurts the other person.
It only destroys your own organs.
Exactly. True forgiveness is an internal release. It allows you to change the parameters of the relationship, perhaps shifting to strictly co-parents or going to absolute zero contact, and firmly reclaim your own energy.
Reclaiming your energy means you have to stop letting your brain romanticize the person who handed you the poison in the first place.
Yes.
So here is a highly actionable takeaway from Guy Winch to stop that idealization in its tracks.
This is a great tool.
He tells his patients to sit down and compile an exhaustive, brutal list of every single one of their ex's worst qualities. The selfish moments, the annoying pet peeves, the terrible fights, the fundamental incompatibility.
Write it all down.
You type this list out, and you save it directly on your phone. And whenever that passive-aggressive nostalgia hits, or you get the desperate urge to text them at midnight, you pull out your phone and force yourself to read the list. In his therapy sessions, if a patient even hints at idealizing their ex, Winch just holds out his hand and says, "Phone, please."
The reason that phone please tactic works so well neurologically is that it actively breaks the dopamine loop of the methadone of memories we talked about earlier.
Right, because you're intercepting the craving.
Exactly. Your brain wants the hit of the good memory. By forcing yourself to read the bad memories, you deny the brain the dopamine hit, and eventually you train your brain to remember the reality of the relationship rather than the fantasy it's craving.
That makes perfect sense.
What all these sources seem to be pointing toward is a massive reclaiming of agency. Heartbreak is an incredibly effective catalyst for post-traumatic growth.
It forces your hand.
It does. Whether you are currently surviving a romantic breakup, navigating a devastating professional betrayal, or simply trying to understand the mechanics of human resilience, you need to know this. You possess the ultimate locus of control over your recovery.
The trauma happened to you, but the reconstruction is entirely in your hands.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over. The sources we explored today focus heavily on surviving the loss of a specific person and mourning the future you planned with them.
Right.
But what if the ultimate realization of post-traumatic growth isn't just learning to live without them? What if the real breakthrough is realizing that the version of yourself you are mourning never actually existed either?
Wow.
What if heartbreak is simply the painful but necessary shedding of an outdated identity, leaving you with a complete blank slate that you are now entirely free to design from scratch?
That is the true opportunity hidden inside the pain. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take care of yourselves, treat the wound, and keep building.